Good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and we are here with Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. Remember, this is for information purposes only to make sure that we are all safe, because what is health? Health is wealth. Thank you guys for tuning in on this evening. Make sure that you share. Start your watch parties for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. We want to say thank you social media family, that's Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, and all of you out there who watch us faithfully here on Couch Conversations with the Doctors. I see Kathleen Jackson is checking in, and so many others are checking in just as well. As always, we're going to go, actually, as always, we're going to go around the table and do our introductions, but quickly I'm going to let one of my co-hosts do our introductions for this evening. So I'm going to introduce him, and then he's going to bring everybody else on, and that's going to be our very own Dr. Pete Thomas, the family medicine doc who is an infectious disease specialist. He's an HIV specialist. Hey, Sean Kennedy, I see you checking in. And he gets everything done on time and in control. That's our very own Dr. Pete. Dr. Pete, take it away.
Hey, guys. Hey, thanks so much for having us. And thanks so much for tuning in this evening. And we're going to help answer some of your questions. And right now, we're going to turn to Doug. Dr. Doug, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the Chicago area for many years, but a year or so ago, I joined Representative Davis's office as a congressional fellow. I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Great. That's awesome. Dr. Miller?
Good evening, everybody. We're glad to be participating in this discussion once again. Hopefully that we'll be able to answer your questions and maybe enlighten you on some things that you might not have thought about or didn't know about.
All right. And to the one and only Dr. Terry Mason, introduce yourself if anybody needs an introduction from you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the Congressman for always providing this platform for us to be able to enlighten the constituents. And I'm also grateful. And in fact, there's a song, I'm going to say, Dr. Miller, that says, I'm just glad to be in the service one more time.
Amen.
and to the vanguard of health, Congressman Danny Davis, we appreciate your leadership for having this forum to educate the community. Would you like to say something to the community this evening?
Well, I think the real deal is that health will be with us as long as we live. And so it's not a project. It's not a program. It's not something that you can try to deal with every once in a while. It's an everyday, forever kind of thing. And so the fact, it's kind of like religion, if you will. You know, many times when I go to church, I've heard a sermon that is being preached, but I still get reinforced in terms of the way it's conveyed. And one preacher may have done it one way. Another one may have done it a different way. But I still feel the need to go. I'm saying, yeah, I heard that sermon, but I still feel better after hearing it again than I felt before I got there. And so health is one of the largest parts of our gross national product. We spend more money on health care than any other nation in the world. We don't get all of the results that we say we're looking for. I look at my own expenditures, and quite honestly, if I didn't have insurance, I'd never be able to get the kind of health attention that I get. I just simply would not. And to think that there are many people who don't have any of this. I mean, they have to just do the best that they can. So if we are continuing to try and find a way so that every citizen in our country can have access to quality health and medical care, then that becomes a fulfillment of a desire that we have. So I thank everybody for participating. I think the people who chime in and who listen, and I'm going to end up before the evening over asking, because I serve on something called the Rural Urban Task Force of the Ways and Means Committee. There are 4 of us who are co-chairs. Myself, kind of representing urban America. Terry Sewell, who is representing, she's from Alabama, young Black lawyer. Rural America, because much of her district is rural, even though she's from Birmingham. And the 2 Republicans are Dr. Winstrup, who is a physician from Cincinnati, and the other Republican is a college administrator from Texas. And we are constantly looking at what can we raise as issues relating to urban America, but really urban inner city. I'm saying I'm on there representing urban America, but it's really urban inner city America and rural America. And so we're searching and looking, and we just came up with the best piece of legislation I have ever worked on in my lifetime. I mean, I don't care what anybody say. I don't care what they say. I don't care what those who disagree with it say. I could care absolutely less. But this stuff that the president signed last week is some of the best legislative stuff that's been done in this country in a long time. Just imagine if you're unemployed and you can't get your car fixed. Now you're going to get a $300 unemployment check every week. And you're waiting on your $1,400 because you didn't make $75,000 last year. As a matter of fact, you may not have made anything if you was laid off from your job because they had to shut down. And you got 2 or 3 children, and you're going to end up with maybe $8,000 or $9,000 in tax credits, children tax credits. Or you made so little money that you filing with the earned income tax credit. Lord have mercy. There is so much good stuff in there so you could spend weeks talking about it. Much of it relate to mental health. Think of what that does for your mental health. I mean, the anxiety that you had in terms of the landlord coming to tell you that I know I hate to do it, so but I'm just going to have to go ahead and start eviction notices because you ain't paid me in the last 5 or 6 months, and I just can't. I don't want to do it. But I just can't let you go. I got to have my money, and you can say, wait, hold on, Mr. Landlord, till I get that $1,400. I'm gonna give you half of that. The guy will take it. So hey, I'm just delighted to be here and be a part of this discussion this evening.
Hey, well, thank you, Congressman, for sharing that. I do have a question about that, but before we go there, I know that Dr. Maya needs no introduction. She is a true inspiration for me, community, public health advocate, African dancer, you name it. Maya, tell us who you are.
Hey, I am a Black girl from the South Side of Chicago is who I am. I've grown into a woman still living on the South Side of Chicago, proudly serving the South and West Sides of Chicago, and creating equity. Glad to sit and not only be on this panel, but learn from the things my colleagues are saying. Not only that, Congressman Davis, I will say, I was telling Nikki, it with everything you've done, to hear you say it was one of the best pieces of legislation, you ever worked on. I think that's heartwarming. Honestly, from someone who, believes in equity and loves loves to see when things are navigated as far as social determinants of health. Those of you know, I'm not a smoke blower at all, but it really touches my heart to hear you say that. And hear you say it with such pride. Super excited about, where we are coming to, as far as serving the underserved in this country, and realizing that kind of also what you're doing is healthcare. Transfer of wealth is healthcare. Inequities, fixing inequities and social determinants of health is healthcare. Assisting people with things that they're anxious about is healthcare. Because when we do those things, then that gives, it's part of your purpose, and I hear it every time, but it's also part of our purpose. And when we fulfill our purpose, we then make space for our humankind to go on and fulfill their purpose. And that's how we make this world a better place. Thank you all for what you do, and thank you all for the things I've learned from every last person on this panel. So yeah.
Well, I just want to echo what Maya said. That was very powerful, Congressman, that you said that, and I think people may not completely understand how it relates. But I mean, people can't focus on their health if they are struggling to live. People are not coming to their doctor's appointments if they're unclear about their, if they're going to have a place to live, next week or not. So they're not going to pick up prescriptions. They're not going to go get vaccinated. They're not going to show up for an appointment. And so it does matter that you guys fought so hard to get people, a life raft, basically, until we can get out of this thing. And so kudos to you and to all your colleagues that fought for that. And so, I'm looking forward to coming out of this thing, and I'm happy that you have this forum for us to explain how the two relate. Nikki, you want to take it over?
Oh, sure. So we want to say good evening to Yolanda Williams, who's here. Dr. Jason, in reference to that song you shared earlier, Kathleen Jackson says, amen. Linda Johnson says good evening to everybody. Lanye Williams says good evening. Kimberly Alexander, thank you for all the work that you do, Congressman, sharing this wealth of information here. Virginia Knight says, evening all. It is to be alive. Kim Jackson once again says, wow, Congressman, that is fantastic. Tony Jones says, good evening, everyone. Tony Hansen has checked in and says, although I am unable to be with you guys tonight, I know you guys will hold down the fort as I spend this evening completing my research course. I am truly grateful to be one of your colleagues. Okay, so we're going to get right into the questions, right? So last week, we had a little over 600 people who asked exactly what is, and Nat Ash says, hashtag powerhouse. We had a little over 600 people who actually asked the question when we were talking about sleep and how important it was. And we had a number of questions of people who asked exactly what is sleep apnea.
Yeah, so I think she may have froze on us, but so sleep apnea is a disorder where patients stop breathing briefly throughout the night. Usually it's due to a crowded pharynx in the back of your throat. You have very large tonsils and a very thick neck. Typically, patients who are obese will be sort of predisposed. They'll have sleep apnea more often than if you're not obese. And so it's basically when you stop breathing briefly, like seconds, even 30, 40 seconds throughout the night. And so what happens is you're not getting a good night's sleep because you stop breathing, then you wake up, you stop breathing, you wake up, and you do that throughout the night. And so typically these patients are they are sleep deprived, they fall asleep during the day, they tend to have high blood pressure because your body views the lack of sleep and the fact that you're suffocating at night as a stressor. So you're secreting those stress hormones, which is making your blood pressure higher. And typically, Maya and Dr. Miller can tell you that sometimes when we have people who have very resistant hypertension, we will often ask about sleep apnea. And once you get those folks with a CPAP, which is the mask that has pressure in it and it forces the airway open in the back of your throat. Once we get people on that CPAP mask and have them to continue their blood pressure medicine, the blood pressure tends to come down. So basically, it's a crowded pharynx. The back of the throat is very tight and it doesn't allow air to come in and out. Anybody else want to chime in with that?
Let me just ask then, are you saying that obesity can contribute to sleep apnea?
Absolutely, Congressman. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we try to define this term sleep apnea, it is a sleep disorder, and it is a situation where the problem is that you're having recurrent, as Dr. Pete said, recurrent periods during a night that you are intending to sleep. You're in bed thinking that you're sleeping, but you're having recurrent period of what we call arousal, which means you might not wake up to the point that you are aware that you're awake, but you're having periods when you stop breathing, your body aroused from sleep, and therefore you are not getting. And generally, this occur in that portion of sleep where people most get the best rest. So so when you get into the period where you really would be resting, that's when you go into the stop breathing, and so therefore you come up out of that resting. And so during the night, the reason for you sleeping is that for you to get rested and allow those kinds of things. The other thing that happens when you stop breathing, your oxygen drops, and there are reactions in part of your body to that, in terms of organ functions and hemodynamic function. Hemodynamic function means functions in your blood vessels and in your heart. They respond to that in usually negative kinds of ways. And so oftentimes the patient will come to the doctor and saying, "Doctor, I'm just so tired." And then, the question is, are you sleeping? Yeah, I go to bed at 10 o'clock and I don't get up until 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. But that doesn't really, and oftentimes they're not aware that they're not sleeping, so they can't say that I'm not getting rest. They think that they're getting rest, but they're just as tired when they get up in the morning as they were when they laid down to go to sleep. And so therefore, as he said, there are a lot of consequences to sleep deprivation, and there's a lot of consequences to the other kinds of problems that occur because of you not breathing during those periods of time.
Mm-hmm. And then, my mic on? Yes. And the last thing about kind of talking about what it is, it can turn into, depending on how long you have it, and the reasons you have it, and whether or not they get dealt with. Because if you have a reason why, like allergies, or if obesity is contributing to it, there are other reasons why. If you deal with the reason, then a lot of times the apnea goes away. But to break it down, it can be something that's blocking it, or it can be your brain just forgot to breathe. One thing that helps me remember it is apnea. A means without, and then the nia, you get it with breath. Like that's where we get the new and pneumonia. Like, so without, you're sleeping, sleep apnea is you're sleeping without breathing. And it can come from signals from your brain not telling you to breathe, or the most common causes are what Dr. Pete and Dr. Miller kind of talked about. And back to, I remember, thank you for saying that, Dr. Miller. I remember when Dr. Hampton and Dr. Pete were talking about kind of the long-term consequences of sleep deprivation. Now, remember, we're saying the same thing: high blood pressure, because your body's under stress, but B, your blood vessel repair occurs while you're asleep, right? Heart failure, because that's part of your vasculature. Associated with diabetes because of obesity, other things, and inability to regulate. So my body's not sleeping, so it's not going to regulate anything when I'm awake, including my sugars, and also my memory and my function. So that haziness people feel when you're up during the day trying to do things, and then ultimately depression. These are all things that we mentioned were consequences of not sleeping last week. Now we're getting into the reason, one of the reasons why people aren't sleeping, which is sleep apnea. So usually, as I recall, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there are 3 types. There's the one that you talked about where something is obstructing. There's a central one, and the third one is a mixture of both. They call it mixed sleep apnea.
So can this be fatal? Can sleep apnea become so dangerous until it can become fatal?
Yeah, some of the consequences of sleep apnea is, as Dr. Meyer just mentioned, that when you don't sleep, you can get heart failure. You get pulmonary hypertension, which means that the pressure inside of the vessels in your lungs get high and makes it more difficult for you to exchange your oxygen. So from that standpoint, it's not something that you will go to sleep, not breathe, and not wake up and start breathing. So you don't just die from it. It doesn't kill you immediately, but over a period of time, it causes enough damage to create other kinds of in-organ diseases that you will suffer and die, and can die at an early age from it. Yes.
So it's important to use that machine, that prescribed machine to have. It's very important. Lanye Williams says, "Thank you for that explanation. I suffer from sleep apnea, and I didn't understand the importance of using my machine on a constant basis." Melanie says, "Hey," from Cook County Hospital. Lorenzo Burton says hello. And Sister Bonnie says, "Great subject." Well, Dr. Pete, we had a couple of questions in reference to the whole sleep disorder once again. And one of the questions was, what about hot flashes and waking up in the wee hours of the night with women?
Yeah. So those are, again, looking at reasons why people are not getting a good night's sleep. So typically when women are perimenopausal, or when the hormone levels are dropping, and it is difficult and your system is trying to recalibrate itself, you can get sort of temperature dysregulation, if you will. And so because of that, that can cause people not to get a good night's sleep. And so obviously because of that, that has consequences that we had talked about earlier: blood pressure, heart, depression, anxiety, all the other things that can happen. But typically the hot flashes, if that's the cause of hot flashes. Now, not all hot flashes are perimenopausal. You may have hormone problems like thyroid problems, where you're too much thyroid, too little thyroid. So really, when you have that situation, you really want to make your physician aware of it so they can draw some labs and kind of see why you're having those hot flashes. I don't know. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I do. Am I on speaker? Yeah. Okay.
Nope.
So one of the things that ties back, what I'm really loving is this conversation, because everything kind of ties into general theme of wellness all around, biopsychosocial. Because one of the things I'm paying more attention to is when I have patients and they're describing hot flashes. I've seen some improvement when we change what we eat. And when I really started to pay attention to this over the last 2 or 3 years. So a lot of caffeinated beverages, a lot of sugar, a lot of things that have been where hormones were then added to. Our body has a system of regulating a lot of it, and then as we mature and those layers come off, like I remember when I was younger, I used to eat I used to eat Flamin' Hots. And what happened with the Flamin' Hots is as my body matured, my body couldn't handle it anymore, and when I see my patients, those things kind of trigger meats with hormones in them, junk foods, sugar, caffeine. Those things can trigger, and kind of decreasing those things, I'm seeing an improvement in it.
Let me ask you
one of the things. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now go ahead, because I was going to ask Dr. Mason a question, but I want to hear him go ahead with this.
Well, I just want to say that early on, many of you know that I spent about 26 years as a urologist treating men with erectile dysfunction. And one of the tests that we used to do to determine whether or not, before we had better tests, that the erectile dysfunction was quote unquote physical, in other words, there was something really wrong, was a test that we used to do called a nocturnal penile tumescence test. What is that? NPT, nocturnal penile tumescence. What does that mean? That when a man goes into REM sleep, that is a rapid eye movement sleep, then usually that's the phase that they will have these automatic erections. And when they weren't there, that told us that there was some other underlying problem that needed to be addressed by their internist, whether it was sleep apnea, because if they had sleep apnea, they wouldn't get to REM sleep because they would have interrupted sleeping patterns that never allowed them to get deep enough to get into that phase of sleep. So we used to put these little strain gauges on their head and the electrodes on the penis and the electrodes in their head to determine whether or not they ever got into REM sleep. So it's important that this issue around obesity is extremely important. And it's not just a matter of weight, it is a matter of health. And there are a number of other things that this distinguished panel has talked about before, but I wanted to also let you know that if you're not getting good sleep, you won't have good sex either.
And I guess if you're obese, that makes it even less likely.
Yes, because first of all, Congressman, when you lie down, you've got to remember all of the abdominal fat when you lie flat pushes up against, as they talked about before, it pushes up against your diaphragm and stops the movement so that you could even take in a deep breath. And this is a real serious problem. And as mentioned before, if you stop breathing, and there are machines that will measure how long that you have these pauses, And if they're long enough, in other words, you stop breathing long enough, you put yourself at some severe risk, as one of the colleagues has already mentioned, for heart attack and or stroke, or both.
You know, I noticed that some people who are obese just seem to be just kind of moseying along in life, kind of waiting for a disaster to happen. I'm saying it seems to take much of the action out of life. That it's as if they've given up almost on life and enjoying life. And you know, it's like saying, I'm just kind of here and waiting on the Grim Reaper or something to take me out and take me away. And if they did something about the obesity, it probably would re-energize them and make them perk up and do all kind of stuff. So I'm very interested in this question of obesity and how do we really get at it, and how do we convince our people that it doesn't just have to happen, that this is just kind of it, you know. And I think there are people who joke about having gained weight during the pandemic because maybe their eating habits changed by virtue of being kind of locked in, not as actively engaged. And so how does one handle that?
Well, I think one of the first thing we got to look at it as obesity is a very complex problem. It's complex because it's not really all just related to one desire to not be obese. It's there are a lot of things that are occurring in our culture, in our society that is influencing people's patterns of eating, and as well as, I mean, if you happen to be going to watch TV. 9 times out of 10, most of the programming that you're going to watch, you're going to have something that's going to be advertising food, and the reason for advertising food is to get the people to eat more food so they can make money. So those other kinds of issues that are outside of just things that individuals determine, but they're things that people come in contact with on a regular basis, and not, that influence them to eat things that they shouldn't eat or eat more than what they should eat. And these are things that are constantly coming at us. And I think that when we look at at these medias, and we're beginning to, as we begin to see, I mean, people often talk about the fact that young people are bigger than what they used to be generations ago. It's because more of these things that make people bigger are available, and they're encouraged. And they're not encouraged from the standpoint of people telling you that you should go out and do this, but they're done in a very subtle way that does influence your behavior. And so these are a major problem that are going on. And so people oftentimes have a desire to make changes, but it's become difficult because of the influences that is constantly bombarding them. And also because these are things that as you begin to see them, you learn them, and you develop behavior changes that ultimately affect how you approach life. And I'll tell you, one of the other things that I look at also is that it's because your weight and obesity is not just a matter only of the food that you take, but it's also what are you doing to burn calories and those kinds of things. And as a society, we are really constantly in a hurry to get to someplace And because we are so in such a hurry, and because sometimes it's dangerous, people tend to ride everywhere they got to go. I mean, if it's more than a block, they're in a car, they get on a bus, they get some kind of transportation. Well, that was somebody's exercise right there. If they aren't going to do exercise, then they don't have any organized program. And as you, if you ever go shopping, if you go to a shopping center, you find that most people, if you come a little bit late, most of the cars are parked close to the door. If you're going to find a parking place, it's way off. Now, those are the places that you should be parking, because now here's an opportunity for you to get some exercise without really just a normal thing that you do. When I was, I remember when I look back at high school, and there are times, I mean, my high school was maybe 5 miles away, but there were days that I walked to school, not because I couldn't afford to ride, but because I decided that it was something good for me, or it was just, it's the habits, it's the push of our society that pushes us and lead us and guide us into doing things that are not healthy for us. And that's why
you was on that doctor kick even then, huh?
Say what?
You was on that doctor kick even when you was in.
No, really, I wasn't thinking of healthy, but I thought that, there was just time I felt like it was, I felt safe. I felt comfortable with walking, and we didn't have some of the issues that we had today. And so, but these are things that are just not going on today. These are things that we are more inundated with in our lives, with someone advertising, and it's almost like we need to when they did the cigarette thing, putting on the warning. We almost need to put that warning on food today, because it is the foods that are being advertised are a hazard to your health.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about, Dr. Miller, when you were talking, is it's like a vicious cycle. So the more obese you get, the more resistant your insulin receptors are. The more resistant your insulin receptors are, the more insulin is secreted. The more insulin is secreted, the more you store fat. So you've got to figure out a way to break that cycle. And the fact that your insulin receptors are not responding, that causes you to secrete more insulin, that causes you to store more fat. One of the things that we talk, at least that I have a discussion with my patients about, is consuming less calories than your body really requires to operate. And so I put it in the form of a company that needs to cut back, right? So if your company normally operates at this amount of fuel, you want to feed your body anything less than that. Now, the challenge there is all the things that Dr. Maya and Dr. Miller and Dr. Terry Mason talked about, which is there's so many influences that doesn't allow you, or that forces you to consume more calories than your body really requires. And if you're not consciously, if your head is not in the game to recognize those forces, to recognize when you're being if you live in a food desert. Well, just because you live in a food desert doesn't mean there's a lack of food. There's a lack of quality food in your neighborhood. But there's plenty of fast food restaurants, plenty of places for you to go and get highly processed foods, and those are the foods that tend to be higher in calories.
Pete, to your Dr. Pete, to your point, one of the things we have to understand too is that too much we put on the individual for this problem. Because Kaiser Permanente, and I have a whole presentation on this, but Kaiser Permanente did a study, and they looked at, I'm just going to read something to you when you talk about the institutionalization and the commercialization of this food industry, that 50% of children's shows have food advertising. 50%. And that's the highest group. Dramas 25%, sitcoms 22%, reality shows 16%, but children's shows 50%. Now, we establish these dietary patterns early in life. And the reason there is a science and a deliberateness around why the children's cereals there is a science of colors that has been used to create a interest for and a lower shelf for children's food. Cereals, particularly all the sugar sweetened cereals, are on these low shelves with these particular colors. They're not there because they pick, no, there is science behind every color and every color combination that they use with the little cartoon characters that entice these children to start this. And when you start and addict these kids on this sugar crack, what do you expect these young people to do? And even if they get an opportunity to get good food, they may not necessarily choose to eat that because their taste buds have been engineered, like our taste buds, to something that is salty, crunchy, and oily. And if it's not that, it's sweet. But if you think of most of the stuff, potato chips, popcorn, all of the junk stuff that we eat, these things are not, we need to take the responsibility away because you can't, and nowadays with these, and I'll stop after this, when you have devices that our children have in their hands that they can carry around and look at very closely and have these images, both the direct and the subtle images that these things do, invade their psyche. What else do we expect as we continue to give them the crack of high fructose corn syrup and most of the beverages that they drink?
That leads me to the other question that I wanted to ask, and that is, can we actually create the kind of health status that we are seeking on an individualized basis? Or must it go beyond the individual? I'm saying a person can get educated. An individual can get educated and can pretty much, I guess, do what my cousin, had my uncle to live to be 102 years old. And she measured everything he ate. She was just so commandeering. You ask him how he was doing. I said, Uncle Dude, how you doing? He said, I'm doing fine. And if Cora would just leave me the hell alone, I'd be doing much better. But he did live to be 102. And she just, whatever, no, Daddy, you can't have that. No, Daddy, you can't have that. But must it be done also in terms of group activity or societal activity that will lead us to where we're trying to go?
I think it's a bit of all of it, Congressman. But we cannot excuse the food industry that is creating these products that we know that sugar activates the same brain receptors as cocaine. So we have a responsibility, Congressman, as a government, as a society, to help protect us from ourselves and not to allow there to be such subsidies that make these bad things for us to eat so cheap and the good things that we need to eat so expensive. And so if we could begin to change that paradigm along with what you suggested, which is why Michelle Obama, when she went to try and change the food program for the children in the school, they told her, no, girlie, you go over there and tell them to move around, jump up and down. You leave this stuff here that we've got going, you leave that alone. And though she tried her best and to try and get people to move, you can't out-exercise a bad diet. I don't care what you do. So this is why I believe God has put it in my spirit to be unwavering in talking about this way, because there is no other solution if we don't make one that's based in and on truth and not just the stuff that we've been given as what we should teach. I went to 4 years of medical school at the University of Illinois. And in 4 years of medical school, Representative Davis, we had one 40-minute lecture on nutrition. And that wasn't even real nutrition. That was on deficiency diseases like beriberi and scurvy and stuff like that. So we don't have an investment in our society to actually help our people help themselves.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, the one thing that we're always talking about is allocation and budget deficit and healthcare costs. All of these things are definitely affecting that in a negative manner. If people are unhealthy, it's going to cost more to take care of them. They aren't just going to just go away and go into a corner and die. They're going to seek healthcare. But I think that, this is it's a bigger problem. And the individual can do some things, but if we want to, and that individual is okay. But when we're talking about us as a society, us as a city, us as a country, we need to really address the real problem as opposed to looking at the results of the problem, which is, obesity is a result of a problem. It isn't the problem itself. It is a cause of, so it's the results of some of the other things that are going on. And until we begin to dig at that problem, as he said, the commercializations, the things that are causing young people to become addicted to certain kinds of food, all those things that are going to make them unhealthy, we really need to begin to dig into how we're going to change that. And the fact of the matter, because those are things that make money, they're not going to just happen just because we talk negatively about it. They'll happen only when some of it may even require some legislation in some manner. And certainly, I just don't feel that the conscience of people that are making money is going to be such that they're going to back off making money so that most folks are healthy. But Dr. Pete, you said how you had the little game that you would play. I always used to tell patients is that when you go to the gas station and fill your car with gasoline, you don't just keep pumping with the gas running out. When it's full, you stop pumping. It's and now the gadget that you put the gasoline in, it actually will click off when the car is full. So you then put it back. And so the same thing with food. So the car is only gonna accept the amount that it can hold and need. It's not going to accept more than that. And unfortunately, our bodies doesn't work that way. If it worked that way, we would be a lot healthier. So we have to be able to govern and be able to regulate, not overdoing these things ourselves or in some way. And that means that we need to help people to become better able to resist. And so part of that resistance is taking away those things that are luring people to be unhealthy.
Well, let me ask a different question. Anybody know what the latest is in terms of the hospital situation on the near south side of the city? Mercy. I read something in the paper the other day that people were scrutinizing or looking at this outfit that had sort of indicated that they might be interested in purchasing Mercy, and that the community was looking real hard at the outfit. And I did have a conversation with a member of Congress from Flint who is aware of the outfit there and all. And he did share some information with them Thursday last week. Anybody heard any updates on what's going on with Trinity?
Congressman, the only thing I've heard is, so initially I was hearing that, the hospital was going to close about this time, like I was hearing that it was going to close in 2021 around April or May. And then I started to hear that there was an entity that was interested in keeping it open. But yet they're still accepting patients for like referrals and stuff. And so I still have patients that are getting services done at Mercy. And so it's like they're like caught between this sort of like, we're open, we're not, we're going to stay open, we're not. So it's kind of confusing to me and my patients.
I have been working with some of the physicians who are trying earnestly to create a situation where the hospital could survive. The group that the congressman referenced is an outfit that basically does pain management. I don't know if that's what you heard, Congressman Davis, but they do pain management. And there is some concern as to whether or not they have any stake in trying to maintain the full service nature of the hospital if they were to be successful with the process of picking it up at the cost of $1 from Trinity. There are a number of things that are going on, things that the Health Facilities Planning Board that people could avail themselves of if they choose to have some reading about it. But I think that the concern is that Mercy Hospital, as we formerly knew it, will probably not exist going forward. There is a number of people, including a group of Black physicians, and I've been talking with those folks and everyone else. But it comes down to the money. That's what it comes down to. And the question is, poor people are poor in everything, including their health insurance coverage. And so these things create some problems. And as we talked about the other night, I think it's time to reimagine what a hospital ought to be. Mercy was built back in 1967 when it was fashionable for someone to be admitted to the hospital for a GI workup, just to get an upper GI and a lower GI and a few tests. They came in and stayed 7 days to get a hernia repaired. Those days are long gone, and they're never coming back. So we have to reimagine what kind of care and what size hospitals we need to best deal with the issues that we have today. Mm-hmm. That is not what we have now. And we do have some people who are earnestly, Congressman, and you're aware some of it, who are earnestly trying to put forth a different model.
Mm-hmm. Would not the Health Facilities Planning and Review Board have to approve whatever the services would be in an institution? I'm saying when there are service changes or what services would be provided, even if another group was able to acquire the institution. I think that I have not been as close to that activity lately as I used to be. But I think they would play a very major role in determining what services an institution would provide.
Well, Congressman, I know that there's been a lot of back and forth. I do know that this group has retained the former attorney for the Health Facilities Planning Board as legal counsel. So I would hope that they would be mindful of such things. It does not stop the fact that we need to be certain that somebody is looking at what's going on, because you can't trust the foxes in the hen house. So we have to be very, very careful. And I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on the Health Facilities Planning Board, because they will do their job. They are a branch of the Illinois Department of Public Health and report, as you know, Congressman, to the through the governor's office. But I do know that we have to begin to reimagine, and we have to really think about what healthcare really means and what structures we need to be certain that we get what we need, and not just some place where we get patched up to go right back out there and do the same thing again. And that's why, Congressman, I love the idea of reimagining this thing and leveraging the absolute power of a federally qualified health center and what it could bring to the table in the new configuration of Mercy Hospital. Not to say that we don't need acute care, but what it could bring to help manage that in a much better way.
And then I would like to, when we talked about bringing full circle what you talked about when we opened up, Congressman, you talked about being proud of a space where we were creating equity and serving people. I say both as a patient of Mercy who brought my mama there, and I'm a patient of Mercy. I say it as a patient. I don't know, I'm not sure that a pain management kind of group would have my best wellness interests. Are they going to talk about the things we talked about my gut health and how my gut health impacts my heart health and how that impacts my mental health? Are we going to focus on wellness? Dr. Miller mentioned if we don't also do this, then it's going to end up costing the healthcare industry something. So down the line, as a patient, I would like to say, I don't know that a pain management clinic is going to kind of have my best wellness in mind. I say that as a patient. I say that as a physician. Yeah. So that's what
I think just not just to look at Mercy, but to look at look at healthcare in totality. And I think that's what Dr. Mason is getting at, is that we really need to be looking at what is health and how do we work with that. And what we're doing, basically the healthcare system today is to fix problems as opposed to preventing problems. And so it generally, if you got a, I'd like to put things in simple. If you got an old car with a bad tie on it, after a while, you just can't keep patching it up. And by the time you finish patching it up, you've been paid for a tie anyway. So there's some things here that we really need to be doing in terms of our approach to health, which means education of individuals, changing those things in our society that is causing and creating a situation that lead people into doing things that are creating poor health. I don't know. I sort of had been talking to some high school students and just looking at what their curriculum. These are kids that are in high school now, at their curriculum versus some of the things that I remembered as going on in high school, and it was not the best of the situation. It was not a good situation then, but now it's even worse. I mean, kids don't learn anything about health in school. No, there's no teaching about health. And when someone does try to teach health, they're being attacked. That you don't do this in school. There's other places for this. Well, this is a place of learning, and if you can't learn anything about how to manage and take care of your most valuable assets, that's just there's some fallacy in that whole thing. So we have to really get back to really looking at what is set up, how it's set up, because just as Mercy is failing, most of the hospitals are going to say eventually are failing in the sense of being able to provide good quality care and make it affordable. As you said, Congressman, if you didn't have good health insurance, you can't. There's no way you can get this care. So the problem is, again, it's always. I mean, there's a saying: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and it's cheaper than it's cheaper than a pound of cure. Also, so we have to get into figuring out ways that we can prevent some of these things that are creating problems and causing people to have poor health and causing people to get sick and require hospitalization and require high levels of care, which is very expensive. So, you know, until we really come to that kind of realization and come to that kind of understanding of that, we just need to tear this thing down and really redo it, reboot it. You know, we're going to continue to be patching, and that's what we're doing, patching, and that's a very expensive venture.
And I know we got to go. I'm just Congressman Davis, Representative Davis, Dr. Miller, Dr. Mason, the things you said really make me think, are we in a space of, because when I hear those things, there's a difference that I've learned between doing medicine and doing medical business and delivery of health care. And as we talked about at the beginning of this hour, healthcare delivery looks like a lot of things. It's not just me prescribing a pill after 15 minutes. It is the decisions that we're making, the decisions that the leadership is making, and whether those decisions ultimately serve the populations that need to be served. So I'm, you know, looking forward to seeing whether or not we're going to do business or deliver healthcare.
Wow. Great conversation as always. You know, Dorothy Murray says, good information. And Edna Weatherspoon says, watching with you all. And of course, it's that time again. And I know you guys hate to hear me say this, but until next Monday, I'm going to start with my coworker, Douglas Graham. Until next Monday.
Well, I just want to echo what Representative Davis said about this rather remarkable bit of legislation. And for years, we've heard that government isn't working. I think we're going to see it's going to start to work better for us now. So again, I would look optimistically into the future. And I think there are great questions about Mercy Medical Center. I really would support Dr. Mason in having a look at whether or not we need a pain management center or a federal healthily qualified health center in its place. I think it's a great idea.
Dr. Miller, you're until next Monday.
You know, I think that you know, this forum. You know, I thank you, Nikki, and Congressman Davis for providing this format for us, because, you know, we've been spending a lot of time talking about you know, various healthcare problems. Spend a lot of time talking about COVID-19. But I think that you know, we look at getting out of a crisis, but we are not going to get out of the real crisis. And the real crisis is the health problems that exist, and they're much more than the viruses and the bacteria. They're you know, when we, other than the COVID, and when we spread this thing out over a period of time, it's those other things that are killing more people than these acute issues. And we have to begin to look at that. So, you know, until next Monday, I would say, let us all begin to look at what it is that's making us sick. And when we begin to find out and begin to look at it in terms of what can I do to prevent me from having to use these to get sick and to having to do piecemeal patching on my health system.
All right. You are absolutely right. Dr. Terry Mason, until next Monday.
Until next Monday, I would rather us think about not a diet, but a live it. We need to change what we do and the perspective with which we look at the things we do, from whether or not what I'm about to do, what I'm about to eat, what I'm about to engage in is going to help prolong our life or shorten it.
Wow. Dr. Maya, until next Monday.
Until next Monday, the average span on the north side of Chicago, lifespan on the north side of Chicago is 30 years longer than the south side of Chicago. And it's because of the supportive services and social determinants of health. The things we talked about, including what's happening with Mercy Hospital, highlight the opportunity to equalize and not only equal, but provide equity in it. So as a patient, as a Southside physician, when we have the time, for those of us that make laws and do business, deliver healthcare. This is your opportunity to join us. Deliver healthcare. I call you. I'm not trying to call you out. I'm trying to call you in. Deliver healthcare for me, for my mother, for my community.
All right, all right. You know, Dr. Terry Mason, Yolanda Williams, who has struggled for months on some of the things that you have shared to make things better for her, actually wrote in the comments just now, Dr. Mason, I'm changing. So she's been working on it and she's been posting different things that she eats on Facebook and it's been changing. So she wanted you to know, Dr. Mason, I am changing. I'm changing. Dr. Pete, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, until next Monday, just inspired by my colleagues and all the things that they had to share. And Congressman Davis, I love you challenged us to look and be creative around what solutions we can come up with. And rather it's upstream in public health, we talk about upstream and downstream solutions and problems. And I think, we don't have the luxury, if anything that COVID-19 taught us is that our system is so broken that we don't have the luxury to choose between upstream or downstream. We need a all-out blitz. And sometimes the blitz means you got to blow up this system because this system is so, it's left a lot of people vulnerable. And as you see, the poor was vulnerable, the South Side is vulnerable, the West Side is vulnerable. And so to be very, very creative, to utilize technology and think about creative solutions to our problems, and particularly when it comes to the vulnerable and to those people who are left aside. So I would love to see us challenge this current system, and that does not mean I'm letting my particular patients off the hook. I still want better behavior, right? Even in the challenging environment that you're in, even in the food deserts, even without the great hospitals in your neighborhood, I still want better decisions on your part, but I also want better choices for our patients.
All right, all right. I've got to read this comment because this comment had like 700 hits when this gentleman made it on one of our other social media streams. James and Neil started a conversation in Clubhouse, which is a social media stream, which we're kind of connected to. And James said, Congressman Davis, I watch every Monday. Since March, when Dr. P and Nikki started and helped me understand what COVID really was, I am dedicated. I make sure that my whole entire family and friends have parked in front of their devices on Mondays to get this valuable information that we actually get for free. I want to tell you, Representative Davis, thank you for the federal super site at the United Center. A lot of people aren't aware that this is a federal site making sure that everyone is vaccinated. Thank you for all the work that you do. You're so closed-mouthed sometimes because you're so humble and you never tell people exactly what you're doing, but you are hard at work and you are hard at work for us. There are tons of people who jump in front of cameras to say that they have done this and that. But when you read, you find out that it was really U.S. Representative Danny Davis, the voice of God, who got it done. If I've never told you before, I have to tell you now, thank you. I'm an attorney who lives in the South Loop. So, Congressman, you're until next Monday.
Well, until next Monday, the first thing I would have to do is say thank you to the gentleman who penned that. But I also follow what Dr. Pete just said about challenging. And I hope that we all understand that because we challenge the system, it does not mean that we don't believe in the good things that it does and the good things that we do. But I was thinking that until people were challenging Catholicism, there wasn't no Protestants. They were protesting. And so this whole other bunch came as a result of challenging. And that if systems had not been challenged, things that exist, if women hadn't challenged the fact that they weren't allowed to vote, they'd still be in the kitchen, maybe making chicken and dumplings and doing some other stuff. But women challenged the system. And now, of course, there are women governors, there are women corporation heads, there's even a woman vice president. So there's nothing, and I try and tell people who, say what government is not doing, that's fine. But I don't have any problem with that at all. None whatsoever. I mean, I always say that the difference between government and politics is that government is what you got, but politics is what you want and what you're trying to get. Government is what is. Politics is what you want to be. And so advocacy and raising issues and raising awareness and pointing out weaknesses and fallacies is what we have to do. And so I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for doing that and for helping other people understand that it's all right for them to do it too. That, if people hadn't raised the issue about ambulatory care, we might still just have a bunch of hospitals and we may be what would be called overbedded. But people began to understand that ambulatory services were just as important. And those of us who've been involved in the health center movement are so pleased that the federal government decided in this last package that we would engage the health centers as main purveyors of vaccine all across the country, not just near North, not just Mile Square, not just Esperanza, not just it. I mean, all over the country, they put it in the bill. I mean, we remember when it wasn't but 3 of them. I remember when it was just 1, the one at Mount Bayou. I remember when Clifton Cole and Dan Cantrell and Earlene Lindsay and Miss Moody and other folks and Rosemary Love and folks were going across the country, crying in the wilderness. I remember when we would go in Ted Kennedy's office and he would leave and say, you folks just put your stuff on the floor, do whatever. And we used to sleep on the floor. I remember when we used to go to conferences and wouldn't have enough money for everybody to get a hotel room. And a bunch of us would sleep in one room. We'd take our sleeping bags and stuff. I remember when you know, the medical committee for human rights and all of these folks were just clamoring. We were trying to get rid of Medicaid meals. When doctors would be up and down the street and people would be foregoing treatment at Near North or someplace else, and they'd go where somebody would be ripping them off and giving them. So progress comes sometime in little pieces, little doses, but as long as we keep trying. The last song I heard today was Sam Cooke, and he was Bone by the River. And so as long as we keep believing, struggling, working, and trying, unifying, and coming together, I know that change is going to come. So thank you all. Thank everybody. I am not going to have no steak when I get home. I'm going to get me some spinach and have myself a nice little salad and go to bed. So thank you so much. Hopefully see you all next week.
All right. So Sean Kennedy says, preach Dr. Mason. Virginia Knight says, I appreciate all your time and knowledge. Sandel Scott says, thank you for the conversation. Sister Bonnie says, good, Dr. Maya, good. Audria J. Cox, Dr. Maya, great conversation as usual. Thank you all from Curtis Jones. Nat Ann Wash says, yes, this is awesome again. Hashtag powerhouse. Cindy Scott also says, thank you, Congressman Danny K. Davis, for your long-term service with your beautiful voice. Once again, Yolanda says, I can't wait until next week. And she's constantly thanking Dr. Mason for all his help. As always, we want to remind you guys to meet us right here, same bat time, same bat station on next Monday night right here. And remember to do the following 3 things because we are so close to being able to hug each other very soon. Wash those hands, make sure you're washing really, really good for at least 20 seconds. Sing the happy birthday song. Remember to social distance. Stretch your arms out if you're touching someone and they're touching you. Remind them just to move over a little bit. We're so close to the end. Remember to wear your face coverings. That's right, over your nose and mouth, not just over your mouth or over your nose or on your chin, nose and mouth, making sure there's a snug fit because those droplets are what will get you. And the next thing we want you to remember is to make your appointment and get your vaccine. We don't care which one you get, just get one of them. All right, have a good evening. Next Monday night. Have an awesome.
Thank you all. All right. You're all good.
Congressman, I'm getting ready to call you.
Okay. All right. And thank you.